Good afternoon, everyone. Today we have another lead workshop, empathy, and how do you use it to support students and peers as a student leader. Our facilitator today is Emily Fair from our Career Center, and I'd love for her to introduce herself, and we'll get started.
Hello, as Tirza mentioned, my name is Emily Fair. I'm a career counselor within the Career Center, which is in LynxConnect. So I help students with all steps of the career process, whether that's exploring different majors, exploring career pathways, finding a job, or exploring yourself in terms of better understanding empathy and how empathy shows up for you and for others in school and in the workplace. So thank you for being here today, and I'll get started on our presentation. So first, focusing on what is empathy and how do we develop it? I'm going to start off with a video to kind of present what empathy can be and how empathy should be manifested within a school environment. This is a pretty short film. It's about 3 minutes long, I believe, around 4 minutes long, that talks about students in high school and some of the experiences that they're going through. Even though it's high school and not college, some of the experiences may be very relatable or may resonate with some of you who are watching this right now. It's a little heavy, I'll admit that. So just be prepared for, maybe some emotional reactions to come up, and then we'll process those together after this video. right. So I know that was a pretty heavy video, and I'd like to give space for those who are in attendance today to either unmute yourselves or just put in the chat some thoughts or feelings that are coming up for you regarding that video.
I think one of the things I always remember is that we assume it's just students who might be struggling with stuff under the surface, but that video also shows that the staff and the faculty at that school also had their own things they were dealing with. Nick has in the chat, it's a good reminder to be kind. Logan or Veronica, do you have anything to add?
I was just thinking about how everyone has their own sort of stories and narratives about what's going on for them, and a lot of times it's definitely not just going to be all good all the time. A lot of people, pretty much everyone I imagine, has a lot of issues that they have to deal with, and those can those usually, as you know, part of the title of this video kind of demonstrates, is that's not always stuff that is really talked about out loud. It's not really communicated to others and like openly known. And that's, yeah, that really goes with what Nick was saying, what Nick was saying in chat, where it really doesn't hurt to kind of be kind to other people given the choice, because you have no idea what anyone else is dealing with.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with all of those points that you guys have made. We never know what's going on in people's lives. Maybe they are kind of more quiet in class than they are than usual. We shouldn't be making assumptions about why they're feeling that way or what they've been through, but just respect their space in their personal life, and not try to, push things upon them when we don't know what's going on in their personal lives. Always be kind. I love that. I think that is so powerful and wonderful. And thank you, Tirza, also for pointing out that it wasn't just students in this video who had things going on for them. Sometimes we, forget that our teachers, our faculty, even our academic advisors, we feel stressed out when we come to them, or we feel like, oh man, I just really want an easy day in class. I'm exhausted. I didn't get a lot of sleep. Maybe your teacher is the same way. Maybe they also didn't get a lot of sleep, or maybe their car's damaged and it's like this huge stressor at their back of the mind. So we never know what's going on with others, students or otherwise. Thank you all for sharing. I have another video for us to watch, so I hope you're enjoying the video theme going on here. And this video uses the words of Brené Brown. I don't know if any of you have heard of Brené Brown before, but she is fantastic as a speaker on leadership and empathy and other aspects of personal growth. And she describes empathy in such a beautiful way and explains how it's different from sympathy. So instead of giving you just a definition of empathy, I'm going to let Brené Brown explain it because she will do a far better job than I could ever do. All right, here we go.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, You climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." Yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Okay. Any thoughts on that video? Actually, I welcome at least one thought. I'll phrase it like that.
I might have a thought. So
Yeah.
I think that the video really highlighted that it's important that everyone just needs somebody to listen, even if you don't like have like structured advice or like a path to like give them a solution to it. There's a lot of people, well, at least in my experiences, that come to me and vent their feelings. They really just want me to listen. They don't want me to jump straight to solutions and stuff.
You just hit the nail on the head, because so much of this presentation is going to be about listening and just developing listening skills. So I absolutely agree. And I think Brene Brown makes a great point that rarely does a response, make someone feel better. Like rarely exactly what we say makes a big difference, but it's more just being in the moment with them and forming connection. That's where the real difference comes from. I actually was giving a presentation similar to this in another class, and the student was saying how her partner got a bad grade on a test and came to her, and her immediate first response was, oh, well, maybe you could try going to office hours, or is there like some additional studying that maybe you could do next time? And her partner said, actually, I just need you to say like, wow, that sucks. Like I wasn't really looking for recommendations. And that communication ended up strengthening their relationship. Just saying, I don't need sympathy. What I need right now is empathy. So thank you for sharing that. I absolutely agree. Any other thoughts on this video?
I think it's funny that you bring up relationships, because in previous one that I had, one of the things that would happen was basically if me and my partner were having an issue, what we do is like one of the first questions we do ask is, do you want to problem solve or do you want to vent? And that kind of set the tone for whatever we were talking about next. Because if somebody just wants to vent, then you're not going through the steps of trying to figure out what the problem is and how to solve things. It's just kind of being there for them. And if they were trying to problem solve, then okay, what's the problem? What are the solutions? And go from there. So yeah, I think it's interesting how that connection lies there too.
Yeah. So you've experienced that firsthand, how some people need solutions and some just really want empathy. And I think that's great that you have that communication with your partner, that you feel comfortable with one enough to ask that question. All right. So I just wanted to reiterate those 4 main points that Brene Brown made in that video. Empathy involves perspective taking, so putting yourself into someone else's shoes, staying out of judgment and listening, should say listening. And that can be tricky because as our human nature, sometimes one of our first instincts is to make judgment about people. You have to swallow that back down and say, this is not my time, this is not my place, that's not what's needed in this moment. Recognizing an emotion in another person and then being able to communicate that you see that emotion. This is a skill that can take practice, and we're going to do a little practice of that today, actually. Bringing in those listening skills and communication skills. And there are a couple different types of empathy that I want to touch upon. So there's effective empathy, which involves understanding another person's emotions and responding appropriately. So not just recognizing the emotion, but communicating that. And this shows that you're concerned for their well-being. And it also can result in similar feelings within you. So I am a career counselor, and every now and then I have students who bring in situations that require more counseling. Maybe their parents really want them to pursue a career that they don't want to pursue, and they're feeling really distressed about it because they don't want to disappoint their parents, but they also don't want to go down that career path. And sometimes I experience that effective empathy, and I'm like, oh, I recognize like I'm feeling distress in myself listening to this individual. And that's important for me to recognize as a counselor, to know that, how can I recognize and feel that empathy and also be able to help them get through this situation. There's also somatic empathy, and this involves a physical reaction to what someone else is experiencing. So for example, I was watching, I don't know if anyone's a Tarantino fan, I'm a big Tarantino fan, and I was watching Reservoir Dogs with my partner earlier this week. And normally I'm fine with movies that have some violence in it, but it's a Tarantino. So there's a lot of blood, a lot of violence. And I was like, man, I'm actually starting to feel like my stomach's kind of upset watching this, which doesn't often happen to me. But I had like a literal bodily physical reaction to what I was seeing on the screen. There's also cognitive empathy. And this involves being able to understand another person's mental state and what they may be thinking. So not just recognizing emotion in them, but what are some other thoughts that are going through their head? Again, just want to mention that empathy can show up in different ways depending on the situation and who you're with. I'm going to read off this quote because I think this quote is really beautiful. It's by Simon Sinek. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but if you love TED Talks, he is the guy you want to look up. He's delivered some incredible TED Talks. So I'm going to read this quote for you. There are 2 things I think great leaders need to have: empathy and perspective. And I think these things are very often forgotten. Leaders are so often concerned about their status or position in an organization that they actually forget their real job. The real job of a leader is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in our charge. So especially for you all, getting this leadership certificate, remembering that it's not just about, setting goals, meeting goals and being in charge of people, but making sure that they're okay. Using those empathy skills to check in with them. Checking, is there anything else I can do for you? What would make this workplace more comfortable for you? How are you doing today? Questions like that, that's part of being a leader. Not just necessarily hitting numbers or achieving status or having the title of director or manager by your name. So at this point, I know I've been watching a lot of videos. I've been talking quite a bit. So I want to give you all the opportunity to connect with one another. I have 3 questions here on the screen, and I'd like you just to pick one question that you'd like to talk about with a partner. And I think we have 4 students in this breakout room. So Tirza, maybe we could do 2 groups of 2. Yeah. And just pick a question or 2 that you'd like to talk about. And I'll give you 5 minutes to do so. For those watching the video, at this time, you could pause the video and take some time to reflect on these questions yourself.
So students, I have actually put in the chat a screen snip of these questions. So if you'll open your chat, when you get in the breakout room, you'll be able to see them. And as a reminder, recording does not record your break your room conversations. Those are private. So I've opened the room. It's set for 8 minutes. And if you finish early, you can come back early, or you could do more of the questions until the room's closed. And they should be open.
All right, see you all in 8 minutes. All right, so hopefully you've taken time at this point to think about these questions, reflect on how they show up for you. And in this presentation, we had 2 different breakout rooms. So I'd love to hear from each room which question you talked about, or if you talked about multiple questions, and share out some of the things that you learned.
Well, I'll go. Hi.
Go for it.
So I was in breakout room with Anna, and we talked about the most empathetic person that we know, and you know what they do behavior-wise. And what I learned is that it's some really good supervisors out there. Just that's something that I learned.
Oh, I'm glad to hear you've seen empathy in supervisors. I would hope most supervisors or all that you've worked with have some empathy, but I know there are some that don't show it as well as others.
Because most definitely, sometimes you can run into a few rough patches, but that's okay. I think maybe they can take your class.
Yeah. Would you mind sharing the supervisors who you've had who are empathetic? What are some things that they did, or how did they demonstrate empathy?
Well, I learned that from Anna. So that would be a question for her. But
Okay.
my person was my little sister. So my 6-year-old is autistic. I currently work full time, and I also have a 4-year-old who is actually turning 4 today.
Oh, wow.
And I'll be 38 in June, and so it's been really hard on me, just mental wise, going back to school, because I have a niece going off to college this year too. And so it's just been like really hard. But my sister, she always gives me a listening ear because she's been in the place before, and she never takes it upon herself to respond or to say, well, I will do this like this. She always just says, I understand, it's going to be okay. You're going to make it. I'm here for you whenever you need it. So it's been a really big weight lifted off of me to have someone to talk to. Because my husband has enough on his plate trying to deal with the kids most of the time.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like you're very busy.
Yes, most definitely, always.
It never ends.
Yes, but that's okay. I wouldn't have it any other way. It keeps life going.
Right. Keeps life exciting.
Yes.
Well, I love what you shared, those things that your D says, in terms of like how to support someone, like whatever you need, I'm here for you. You got this. Those are great signs of empathy. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, let's hear from our other group. Logan or Nick, if you want to share out. I feel like you're playing the nose game right now.
Yeah, so we chose the third question. Why might it be good or bad for a leader to have a lot of empathy? And we kind of just fell back on just creating like a cohesiveness within like a team to maximize like your chances of reaching a goal. Logan made like a really good point about a leader is not like a designated person. A leader is like a person who has like those qualities. So like a leader is not always like the top manager. Like a person who's like a crew member of a team also needs to have leadership qualities as well as like empathy in order for the entire group to succeed.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I mean, like, I know I'm sure you've talked about in your leadership workshops and this certificate program that anyone can be a leader, even someone who is, not ranked as highly as others within a system. And you're right that you can be a leader in empathy regardless of your standing or your title. So even if you have someone, more, janitorial staff or sanitary staff who's, cleaning bathrooms, if they demonstrate, maybe you've had a bad day, you're working late and you see them, maybe you're doing homework really late in one of the academic buildings, and they can display empathy to you in a way that shows their leadership skills. And maybe make you feel better, heading home late at night after doing all that homework. And those are leadership skills. Those are leadership qualities. So always remembering, empathy can show up as a leader for anyone in any situation. Great. Thank you all so much for sharing. Any last thoughts? Other things you discussed you'd like to share out? All right. Well, I'll keep on moving with our presentation. Not surprisingly, the next topic we're going to focus on is listening. One of you mentioned this earlier, but listening drives empathy. It is a crucial skill in demonstrating empathy to others. And when you learn to listen, amazing things happen. First, relationships strengthen. I know we gave an example earlier of literally how we've seen this strengthen relationships. Not always providing solutions when someone doesn't want them, but sometimes just listening to them rant, listening to them vent, getting that stress and energy out that's within them. It also helps build trust. It shows that you want to hear what they're saying, you're invested in what they're sharing with you. Likewise, it improves teamwork. If you're at like a group project, giving everyone the chance to share out and listening to what they have to say, it can lend you to be a better and more productive team. It can make you more credible. I've definitely experienced this as a career counselor. Sometimes I have an hour-long appointment with a student and I barely talk. A lot of it is just listening to them and giving them the space to vent those frustrations that they may have. And I feel like they trust me a little bit more. We've built up that trust and have that foundation in our relationship. Increases loyalty, and people see that you care. They're like, wow, this person is genuinely listening to me. They're not on their phone. They're not on their laptop sending an email, but they're with me in this moment and taking time out of their day to hear what I have to say. And that shows that you care. So there are some skills that come with being a good listener. It can take practice. It's not always easy, especially because we have so many distractions going on in our world and we're all multitaskers. Whether or not we're good at it, normally we're on our phone while we're doing homework, while we might be text messaging a friend, maybe while we're trying to order food in line at a restaurant. We multitask a lot. So listening can take practice. It involves making yourself vulnerable. You have to be willing to listen to them and show that you're listening, which requires an amount of vulnerability. Trying to understand them even when you don't agree with them. This is easier said than done. This is related to one of those 4 tenets of empathy that Brene Brown mentioned, which was avoiding judgment. And oftentimes someone may be venting on a topic when you're like, I don't know, I think you're at fault for this. I don't know, I don't think you should be mad at the teacher. It sounds like you just didn't study enough for that test. But this isn't the time or place to say that. This is the time and place to show empathy and show understanding, even if you don't quite agree with them. Imagining yourself in another person's shoes, we've mentioned that before, giving them the space to share their feelings, and also asking people questions. So a lot of times it is just reflecting their emotion and showing that you're listening. And maybe you can say, wow, how are you feeling after all that happened? Or maybe that must have been really challenging. What's bothering you the most right now? Giving them the opportunity to process what experience they've been through. I literally studied listening techniques while I was in grad school, getting my master's in counseling. So I'm going to turn you all into mini counselors today by the end of this session. There's some listening techniques that I'd like to share with you that will lead you to be not only mini counselors, but also empathetic leaders. So one of those listening techniques is active listening, which means you're not interrupting. It means you're sitting there quietly, letting the person say what they need to say. And it also involves paying attention to their body language. Are they waving their hands around? Or maybe they're they're sitting really quietly and they can't even make contact and they're looking down at the ground. Body language can be demonstrative of some of the emotions that they're experiencing. And active listening can be hard, especially if you have an extroverted preference and maybe you really like to talk. Like, bite your tongue if you can and just give them that space for a moment. Another technique is small encouragers. That's what we call this in my grad school program. And these are just small things like, okay, wow, or tell me more about that. Something that just shows that you're there, that you're present, that you're listening. Even if you're over the phone and you can't see their body language, every now just adding like, wow, I had no idea. You're kidding. Something that shows you're listening and you're present. It may seem like really simple. You'll be like, okay, this seems like common sense, but it actually makes a big difference when you are that person and you are, on a vent and you're ranting, just having those like small nods, seeing them go, giving reactions. It shows that you're there for them. Another technique is reflecting feeling. This is a trickier one because it involves that aspect of empathy where you have to recognize the emotion in the individual and then communicate it back to them. So noticing their body language, noticing how fast or slow they're talking, what they're talking about, and then reflecting that back to them. So that must have been really frustrating for you. Or maybe, you sound really upset when you talk about your teammate, or when you talk about this coworker, or you talk about this student who you're working with on this group project. It sounds like pretty simple, but it can be tricky to recognize that specific emotion that they're feeling. Maybe it's anger, maybe it's frustration, maybe it's depression, maybe it's excitement. Maybe they're like really excited about something and just want to talk to you about it. And again, aren't looking for like necessary like solutions or things you can keep doing to keep it happening, but just want to hear like, wow, you sound so happy right now. Like, I can't believe how elated you are. Just reflecting that feeling back to them. And it's amazing how helpful it is when you're that person and you hear that emotion, because it allows us to put a name to what we're feeling. And you're like, oh yeah, that is what I'm feeling right now. You hear me, you see me, you get it. And it makes you feel more self-aware as well of what's going through your body and why you physically or mentally feel this way. It's an amazing skill. And then the other technique I want to share is paraphrasing. This is also kind of a tricky one. It's more advanced, and it's taking what someone says and delivering it back to them in a more concise and condensed way. So maybe they have just like talked for 10 minutes and they've like woven this like, it's like a ball of yarn. It's a mess. It's all tangled. It's all over the place. And you listen for 10 minutes and then you unravel it and give it back to them and say, this is what I heard you say. And it can be really helpful for them to process and to move on and to continue processing those feelings. So maybe they just talked for a really long time about, I don't know what I'm going to do with this major. I thought I liked it. I'm in my junior year. It's too late to change, but I need to graduate in time. I'm not financially able to stay for 5 more years, but this class is just killing me. I got a bad grade again. And maybe after hearing all that, you say, sounds like this class is really making you rethink this major. You're like, okay, yes, that's what it is. That's what I'm feeling. Thank you. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for hearing me. Or maybe they're ranting in this second example about their parents. Maybe they're just like, their parents are driving them crazy. Up the wall, they're not really listening to them. They keep trying to push them to do things and it's exhausting. And you say, I feel like your parents are giving you the recognition you deserve, maybe that you want. It's like, wow, you really get me. It really shows that you are present. And it takes a lot of skill to do this because it means you have to have been doing active listening the whole time, listening to your friend, your roommate rant, and you have to process it and deliver it back to them. So this is more of an advanced skill, but I wanted to mention it because it can be very, very powerful. So now that I've said these things, I want to give you the opportunity to practice. So I have a few statements here. And I would like to hear, if this was your roommate, if this was your friend, and you heard them say this, what are some ways you could respond that would demonstrate empathy? So here's the first one. Probably some of you can relate to this. I know I could when I was in college. No matter how hard I try to stick to a bedtime, there's always too much to do. I never get enough sleep. What's a way you could respond to this individual that would show empathy rather than sympathy? Feel free to unmute or put in the chat.
So Anna has in the chat, oh goodness, I totally understand where you're coming from. I have the same struggle and I'm glad to know I'm not the only one.
I love that. Yeah, showing that they're not alone. Saying, I also feel that way, empathize with you. I've been through that. That's excellent.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd love to hear one more response that you could give to this statement.
Maybe that must be really stressful for you.
Yeah, there's that reflecting feeling. I love that. Or like, you must be really exhausted trying to do that all the time. Maybe a paraphrase could be, you'd really like more sleep, but there's a lot of boundaries to that right now. Kind of just rephrasing it in a way that helps them see it in a different light. Awesome. All right, we're going to move on to our second example. So maybe someone tells you, again, a friend, maybe you've heard this before. I have no idea what I'm going to do after I graduate. What are some ways you could respond to this that, again, show empathy, not sympathy? I'd love to hear from at least one person.
So in the chat we have, thank you for sharing how you're feeling. It sounds like you have many options to possibly consider.
That's a great paraphrase. I love that. Yeah, just rewording it in a way that can present it to them differently. So maybe instead of, I like how you opened it up too. Like it sounds like you have many options to possibly consider. That's great. You're not limited. You have many options. I think that I love that as a career counselor. Because a lot of students do feel like limited. They're like, I don't know what to do. I have no options. I'm like, actually, you have a ton of options. You just don't realize it.
I know I would probably ask, how do you feel about that?
Ooh, I love that. Yeah, like an open-ended question.
Yeah.
Yeah, what feelings come up for you when you think about graduation? All right, let's move on to our third one. This is like a positive one. This person's excited. I can't believe how well I did on that test. I'm not complaining, but I have no idea how I got such a high score. How would you respond to this? This is an easy one. Just say something. What's a positive thing you could say? A reflective feeling. How is this person probably feeling right now?
You sound so excited.
Absolutely. Yeah. You sound like elated. I love, you are giving off so much energy right now.
So Anna put one in the chat. She said, that's amazing. You did well. It sounds like whatever steps you took worked out great for you this time.
Fantastic. Yeah. It sounds like you did great. All right, I have a fourth one. For the sake of time, I won't make you give feedback on it. But here's another example. Maybe we've heard this one as well. I know I said I'd go out with you guys, but I'm really feeling down today. I'm sorry. I think I'm just going to stay in. Maybe empathy could look like, I understand. I've been there too. Take all the time you need. Something that shows like you are there with them.
Also letting them know here if you need anything.
Yeah, that's also great. Take the time you need. Is there anything I can do to help you? That's fantastic. Thank you for adding that. All right. So a little suggestion that I'll give you all going forward. I would recommend asking a roommate, friend, partner, what are some things that you could do to be a better listener for them? One of you gave a really powerful example earlier with your partner of asking before like someone says something, do you want solutions or do you want, just for me to listen? And that can be really powerful in a relationship. But again, whether it's with a partner or a roommate. So I would encourage you after this presentation, to pick someone that you trust, someone that you're comfortable with, and just ask, how could I be a better listener for you? Are there questions I should be asking that I'm not asking? Or my identity is hindering our ability to communicate? I'll also make a plug for a video on listening skills. If you've enjoyed learning about these listening skills and want to dive deeper, there's a very popular video on YouTube that Tirza put the link to in the chat. A lunch and lead listening skills for leaders. It's about an hour long, and you can count this as one of your experiences. I think you need like 8 programs or workshops that you have to attend to get the certificate, and this can count. All right, so we're nearing the end of our presentation. The one last thing I just want to touch upon is how our identities can intersect with how we show empathy. This is a wheel of a lot of identities that we all have and that show up differently. Some are visible, like appearance or what we do for a job, our role in the organization, like a student. That's a visible identity. And then we have some that are invisible, like our mental or physical ability, or maybe, like our income, our political or religious beliefs. And those things can affect if we show empathy to someone or if we feel comfortable, presenting information to someone to gain empathy. So thinking about these identities can make us connect more with someone or not connect as well with others. As a career counselor, I meet with a lot of international students because we have a lot of international students at CU Denver. And I am a cisgender, white citizen of the Citizens of America, female. And I meet with a lot of students who don't share the same identities as me. And I can sometimes tell in appointments that they don't feel comfortable sharing some information about their background or their culture. And I absolutely respect that. Maybe I'm not the best person for them to get empathy to because of our identities. Maybe there's someone else in the counseling center that I could refer them to that more accurately reflects them, and they would feel more comfortable sharing those experiences with. Our identities may make us a safe or unsafe person to approach and can impact how comfortable someone feels with us, especially when we think about, religion and politics. Maybe you have someone who's a friend of yours, but you differ strongly on some political views. So maybe you don't want to give them empathy as much when they're having issues because that identity is really frustrating for you. And giving out empathy, it does take emotional and mental labor. Like we talked about before, those somatic empathies, cognitive empathy, even looking at pictures of the earthquake that happened in Syria and Turkey. I feel some of that somatic empathy. I feel like stressed out. And so recognize, your boundaries as well. Do you have the mental ability to put forth empathy in every situation or with every person, and recognizing where is that boundary for you and who do you feel comfortable getting empathy from? So some takeaways that I want you to have from today: strive to connect with others. Like that very first video that we watched, you don't know what's going on in people's lives. So be kind, always be kind. I love that someone said that, always be kind. Be in the moment with people, practice those listening skills, Be aware of your privilege and identities and how it's affecting how you show empathy. And if someone doesn't want to share with you, it is okay. Don't be offended. It may just be a difference in your identities. So thank you all so much for coming today. I think Tirza has a survey for you to complete. And if anyone has any last thoughts, I welcome those as well.